topsoil, then it almost immediately heals. And that's why. The diversity. So there's that same thing that he was talking about, diversity of plant species in the dominant situation, diversity of particle sizes in the soil. Diversity is a good thing. It's what makes us strong. That's why we all don't look alike. That's why we're all different.
Resiliency, and I think when people ask how we're managing forests for resilience, that's the word right there. Is it's diversity, right? Because the future is unknown. We don't know what impacts we're going to have with climate change. We don't even know what tree species will be able to grow here in 50 or 100 years. So the best thing that we can do is have a diverse forest that maximizes the opportunities and the options. So whatever impact comes down, whether it's increased temperatures, increased wind events, it's a new forest pest, some insect or an invasive plant, if we have a diverse forest, it's just more likely to be able to take that hit and bounce back, right? So that's the thought process behind. I know that's a big, broad thought process, but when we've got that paint can in our hands and we're walking up to look at this tulip poplar or that red maple, those are the overarching themes that are directing that process.
He looks where he's going to go. There's a lot of things to look at, of course, as it's practiced and taught through our little group, Healing Harvest. Worst first is not a random experience. This is not a random thing. He's just not out here going, this one's worse than that one, whatever. It's a scientifically and experientially learned collection of information. At Healing Harvest, we teach worst first through a system we call NTMPs. Make up your own acronyms. When you're making up your own acronyms, you know you're getting somewhere. And NTMP stands for Nature's Tree Marking Paint. And Nature's Tree Marking Paint is a system of indicators in 3 categories of damaged, diseased, and inferior. And there are 6 visible characteristics within those categories of damaged, diseased, and inferior. And when 3 strikes from either 3 categories occur on a single individual, that tree is ripe for harvest as the worst first. He takes all of that information, doesn't think about any of it, it's become intuitive to him, walks through the forest and knows exactly which tree to get. When you're teaching someone that is new to this, but inspired about it, loves the horses, loves the forest, loves the environment, they got to have a frame of reference for making the selection of worst first. And that's how it's done. That's how it's done. Nature's Tree Marking Paint indicators.
Can I point out an example of that here, Jason?
Yes.
So we've got this red maple tree that's been marked for harvest with blue paint, and the indicators that helped us come to that conclusion, you can see this damage here with some rot developing. Right, the tree has a rot pocket in there. Water will help carry that rot down further into the stem of the tree. So over time, the tree will weaken further and is more likely to blow over or be damaged. So that's one strike against it is its species. It's a red maple, which is a species that's very, very dominant in that older age class, and a species we'd like to decrease. We don't want to eliminate red maple, but we'd like to have less of it in the future of the forest. We'd like to have more of that space filled with new species like cucumber, sugar maple, red oak, those types of things, right? So we're going to try to decrease the component of red maple slowly and over time. So there's 2 strikes. And the third is its form. If you look, that tree is what we would call an intermediate or co-dominant at best. We'll call it an intermediate. The tree to its right here, this is a dominant, and that plays out in the crown. Look at the crown of this tree, right? It's a round crown, it's way up in the canopy. It has outcompeted the tree that we've painted. Do you notice the crown of this tree? This one's been a little starved for light. It had to grow to the side to capture its light, and its crown is not as well rounded, right? So there are 3 strikes against that tree, and like Jason said, that's the blue paint, right? It's entirely context based. So this exact same tree with blue paint, if we plucked that out and put it in the woods 20 yards or 200 yards to the south of it, that may now be the best tree and one that we want to leave. It depends on the context and what its neighbors are like and how it's interacting with those neighbors. Another good example would be the understory. If the understory here was filled with multiflora rose, an undesirable invasive plant, we may want to say, oh, let's put the brakes on. We don't want more light here at all. Leave that tree and let's address this problem. So the tree selection process is very context dependent. So what's important to know is that with all those criteria, all those issues, we can find a strike against any tree, right? So we can walk up to the nicest tree in this forest, a large tulip poplar behind us, and we can say, I see a couple dead branches up there. I see some knots up top, which are some defect in the wood. If we're looking for an excuse to cut trees because we want to make money, we can find a reason to cut any tree in the forest. But that's not good forestry. Instead, we want to step back and say, if I cut that tree, what is the likely impact to the forest? That is the number one thing that drives our thought process. By cutting this tree, how will I influence the forest? Is it a positive influence or most likely a negative influence? Yes?
So what about the new one? If you cut that one, this new one can grow because it's coming right out of the same...
Sure. So the question is...
This one's straight too.
Sure. Does cutting this tree help this, and is there then a benefit to harvest that tree? Well, let's step back and look at the crown. This is why I'm always falling over in the woods. So the smaller tulip poplar is fairly straight, but as we look towards the top, I see some crooks in the main stem. You see a couple curves and bends in the stem?
The new one?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to call it a new one.
No, it's not a new one.
Because it may be older than we think. It may be small because it's been suppressed.
Just the good plant.
So this create young forest. We also want to have a strong component of older trees. So if I was going to cut this tree, I would want to know that it's likely to be replaced by a tree with really high potential and high vigor. And I'm not convinced that this tree has those things.
Goes.
Actually, in this scenario, neither one goes.
No?
This
Why?
tree is so short, it's not impacting the productivity of this tree, right?
Okay.
Their crowns are not interacting at all.
I just thought the root system.
Well, so the thing to think about is that in our area of northern Pennsylvania, trees need water, they need health, they need the minerals and food from the soil, and they need sunlight. Those three things, right? Well, we're very fortunate that we have a lot of water here, right? Anybody who lives in Erie County can attest to the fact we've got lots of precipitation. We also have extremely rich soils. These are what, Rich, 14 or 15,000 year old soils?
Yeah, I remember when they were formed.
Okay. So Rich was young, but these are very young, rich soils full of lots of minerals and fairly deep topsoil. So our limiting factor for growth is not water and it's not nutrients, it's sunlight. So if we want to benefit this tree, the way we would benefit it is by providing more sunlight, and obviously cutting this doesn't accomplish that. So I think this tree has very limited potential for the future, but I also don't have a positive impact to the forest by cutting it, right? There's no reason to cut this. I won't think I'll be benefiting anything, even though I doubt this is a long-term player in the forest, to develop a different strategy. And so for ash, we've harvested most of the ash in this forest. What we've tried to do is identify a small number of ash trees that had good form and high vigor, big round crowns, and we're getting a lot of sunlight, and we've tried to leave a few of those behind, but we understand that they're in all likelihood going to die.
For additional information on loving the land through working forests, information can be found at www.foundationforsustainableforests.org.